where with the kind of progression from small games to large games, publishers kind of reduce their risk and hedge their bets on larger franchises and also things that would be a sure bet in the marketplace. Whereas we've kind of hit a phase in the industry with the introduction of new gaming platforms like the iPhone, casual gaming platforms like the internet, where this kind of new wave of innovations come up, and that's kind of challenging a lot of the old playing it safe philosophies at the lower end of the game market, and for larger companies like Pandemic, it's meant that we're focusing more on the blockbuster titles, and those blockbuster titles have to stand out to cut through the noise of just the sheer number of games that are out there, and to stand out from the competition. So I suggest that we're entering a phase where, at least as John Riccatello has been pushing, we need to focus on innovation. We need to focus on games that are going to get the advertising, get the hype, and kind of deliver on that, and be the blockbusters to stay profitable and to keep growing. Otherwise, we'll just get left behind.
I'm going to throw to you really quickly just to extend that, because it's one thing to hear from Pandemic where there's a bottomless pit of, well, not so much anymore. Where there is effectively a bottomless pit of money, and there is the ability to innovate and run off and create without a huge amount of financial risk. What about the smaller independent developers? Are we heading the same way, or is it more a toe-the-line situation for them?
I think we just got to be a little bit aware early on about the scope of the project. There's a couple of things there, one of which is I think over time we've gotten a little bit better at scoping out how much we can do. I mean, it used to be that it used to get done about 30% of what we thought. I reckon now we probably get maybe 80% of it done. So we're getting better at getting the size and shape of the thing right from the outset. The other thing that I think we've got a lot better at, I mean, for example, like years ago I worked on a game at Brad Bag for the PS2, and I added as a designer of that project just the most ridiculous amount of extraneous bullshit. And there were these whole things like the animated characters that sort of talk to you and it's a racing game, right? And there was a point in production where we realised we're not going to do something to cut it, and I was upset. I'd go outside and pace around and smoke a lot of cigarettes. It was really cross. Best thing that ever happened to the game, and I think I've become quite cavalier about cutting these things. I mean, Albert Einstein said things should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. And I think that generally speaking, if you're going about things in the right order, cutting things away is actually going to mean you get a little bit more polish on things come together more tightly. It's usually the player's benefit if things are as simple and as streamlined as they can be. We don't always succeed at that, but I think what we're getting better at doing is identifying, as Lewis was saying before, what the core of your game is, like what is it really about? And if you can build that bit, it's kind of like a Katamari or a snowball. So if you kind of get stopped halfway through rolling it up, it's still still the game, it's still fun, it still works, but it's got a bit less stuff in it. And a lot of the time it's actually not significantly worse as a result of that. Whereas if you're developing things based on some of that, and we've done this before, we've been in situations we've had to build a game to a very short timeline years ago, where we're building the tools and the tech alongside the game itself, and sort of you're in a position where you've kind of built most of the art for a platform game and you're getting close to alpha and you haven't figured out whether the running and jumping stuff is any fun. And that makes it really, really hard to make a good game, whereas if you can build the core bits of your game that make it work early, which as I say, we are getting better at, and a good example of this was an original IP project we were working on a little while ago, and it's kind of in the process of happening, where we built in the space of a couple of months really the core of the game very, very quickly, and it had almost no content, it lasted about 5 minutes, but it was fun, it worked, and it was like one of the most pleasing things that I've worked on, kind of knowing that if we're able to build more and more stuff onto this, it is going to scale out. It might be a great big game, but if we are forced in a position where we're having to make cuts to it and change things, it's not actually going to fundamentally break what's under there. So I think the best thing you can do to defend against that, particularly if you're not going to get more time, if you have to be more nimble about this, is just isolating that core of the onion first before you start worrying about what the outer layers are going to be. There's a question back here, I think.
Yeah. for all three of you recently that there's never been a game that's been worse off for being cut for features that might not be, or for any reason, that you don't get a worse game for cutting outline features than you would for carrying on with those features for a later point of development and then having to make a decision. Would people agree with that?
I completely agree, so long as you're talking about the right features. So if you've got the core of the game locked in, then a lot of that stuff that maybe would make it a little bit flashier, a little bit of complexity, a little bit of something extra. A lot of times cutting that stuff away that you might be really in love. As a designer, the easiest thing is to add things. I mean, you can come up with stuff right through the project. You're always spotting things you'd love to add. But being able to make the call of, what's the least I could be left with, what will kind of really cut away from this, and leave that for later, leave that for when you actually really understand your game. I think in most cases, whittling it down, sort of how you might consider making a sculpture. I say, cut away everything that doesn't look like an elephant.
Well, it also gives you a little more time. We always complain at the end of the project, man, if I just had a few more months to polish this, if I just had a few more months to hone that in. And sometimes that process of saying, well, what is really adding to the entertainment value of this game, and what's just kind of there, and it's kind of a pleasant little distraction. If you can, cut the right things, and trim all that fat off of there, then you do end up usually with more time to kind of polish the, those tried and true features that have been there from day one, that you established from day one as being the core fun factor, and the game always benefits, in my experience, that way.
I also definitely agree. It's far better to kind of cut the peripheral kind of game features that aren't related to the core experience as early as you can, if they're affecting the polish that you can put into the core experience. And we've always got that trade-off between kind of ambition, innovation, and the time we've got left. So when it comes to the crunch, you've got to kind of cut where you're least going to affect core systems of your game, or things that the player's going to be spending most of their time doing in the game. So it's better to polish those core elements instead.
Yeah, question.
Yeah, I was just asking if each of you could define exactly what you would say the core element is. Is it a USP? Is it a single sentence? Is it a theme of the game?
Well, for us, we call them USPs, but they're really the tenets of the game. Like and it shouldn't. I always say it shouldn't be more than 3 things, and it shouldn't take you more than 2 or 3 sentences to describe. If you ask me, what the game's about, and I go into a half-hour discussion, or I hand you a 3-page doc, I failed, because you're not going to get it. And I used to be in the music industry years ago, and I remember the best piece of advice I ever got was for a song. And if you're driving in your car and you're flipping through the stations and you hear a tune, if it doesn't capture you in the first 10 seconds, it makes you stay on the station, it's not worthy to be on the radio. And I kind of took that into game design when I got into games and describing your game. If you can't sell the game in that first couple sentences, or those 2 or 3 key features of the game, it's not compelling enough for the person on the receiving end to go, that's interesting, I want to hear more. Then you've probably got a pretty clouded, convoluted idea that needs that trimming down of what it really is. So yeah, I do feel that you should be able to describe it, 3 key features and a couple sentences.
It's different for different games, but it should always be to do with what the player does, because most games consist of a thing that you do over and over again, and that should be what it's about. It's never about characters, narrative, content, setting, any of that stuff really. I mean, that stuff can be really important to a game, but it's not what you're testing everything else against to see whether it fits or not. I mean, it needs to be that activity that you do.
Yeah, I'd also agree with that. Basically, what the player spends most of their time doing throughout a game. Those are the core elements. Anything that could be a bullet point on the back of a box, those are also things that deserve your time and attention and love in the polish stage.
And avoiding the temptation to, because it's going to be on the back of the box, and it's got a glider mode. You want to try to avoid that. As tempting as it sounds.
703 players online. We are actually out of time.